Hello everyone, Pete here, and this is the new 1TB SD card packed with 61,000 retro games for the Steam Deck. And also this new 1TB SD card that has 42,000 retro games for the ROG Ally, Ally X, Legion Go, and indeed all Windows-based handhelds. Let's blast through how these work, what systems and games are included on each, my top 11 tips for the Steam Deck version SD card, and also the top 10 tips for the SD card for the Windows handhelds. Plus we'll test out some games to make sure everything is working correctly, particularly on the higher end systems, and I'll share on whether you should get one of these. If you have any questions at all during this, then please drop those in the comments and I will get back to you. And if you want to see more content from me, then just drop a like and also subscribe to the channel. So let's start by how these work, and starting with the Windows SD card, we simply insert the SD card into our Ally, Ally X or Legion Go. The SD card is instantly recognized, and we can see that these cards are jam-packed with games as there's only 5 GB free out of almost 1 TB. And this really is literally plug in and play. As to launch PC games, we will click on the Play Night folder, and scroll down to the Play Night full screen app file, and click to launch into the PC games section. At first the controls didn't work for me, but then I realised I made the number one Ally mistake we all do, which is the controls were set to desktop. So make sure it's set to gamepad mode, and we'll come back to this in a moment. Let's press select and start together, then exit Play Night, head back to this main folder on the SD card, select the open retrobat folder, simply click on the retrobat file, and then boom, we are now in the retro emulation part of the SD card. It's also super easy, and again we'll come back to this shortly. It's important to note that both of these new 1TB SD cards are both A2 speeds, which as we know are faster than the A1 speed cards found on the lower 512GB versions of these emulation SD cards. We boot into it slightly different on the Steam Deck, so first we'll head to power, then fully shut down. Then let's insert our SD card. Now hold down the volume up button and also the power button together. Head to boot manager. Simply select the SD card option. And then a few moments later, this gorgeous comic book style interface fully loaded with over 61,000 retro games is now ready to be explored. To get back into SteamOS, we simply hold the volume down and power button together, select the hard drive, and we're back in SteamOS. So let's now go through the top 11 tips for the Steam Deck SD card. And tip 1 is to make sure our audio is not muted in SteamOS before we head into the BIOS and launch into the SD card. Otherwise our audio will be muted regardless within the system, which is called Batacera. Tip 2 is to press start, then head into system settings, head to the screen rotation area, and the default for some reason is 90. So we need to change this to 0, which will then restart it. And doing this will fix our game screens being partially cropped. Tip 3 is essential. Head into controller settings, then controller mapping, and it is crucial, I cannot stress this enough, that we map our buttons right here, otherwise games like Dreamcast games will not work correctly. So definitely do this if you get this SD card. By the way, make sure that the hotkey is mapped to the select button, so that when we quit games by pressing the select and start buttons together, then this will work. A huge thanks to one of our great viewers, Frankenstein, for these 3 tips, who commented on the last Steam Deck retro vid. Man, you guys are so smart, and I really do appreciate every single one of you. Tip 4 is to head into game settings, scroll down and enable auto save load. This is so good as it will auto save games when exiting and will also auto load save states too. Ace. For tip 5, while we're still in game settings, head into retro achievements. Enable this and log in if you have an account, and I really do recommend doing this to keep track of all of our retro trophies. Tip 6 is to head into user interface settings, then theme set, and we can change the system theme. Personally, I find the default comic scrap not too great, so I'm going to select this Alec full, and now we have this absolutely gorgeous and almost Switch-like interface, which is so nice. Tip 7 is to head into sound settings and disable front-end music, as the menu music as we browse the different systems can get pretty annoying. Tip 8 is to head into game collection settings, then systems displayed, and there are actually loads of systems missing on the default setting, like Atari Lynx and Jaguar for example. So I'm going to select all so that every system on the SD card is now displayed. Tip 9 is that if we press X on the main system menu, we can now search for any specific game that we want to, instead of trolling through each system, which saves tons of time. Tip 10, while we're exploring all of the game systems, is to hold down the Y button to favorite games. Then they'll get a star next to them, and then in the main favorites folder, all of our most loved games will appear here. Talking about our favorites folder, for the final tip 11, let's head to game collection settings, and on start on system, we can select whichever console that we want to start with. But I'd recommend changing this to favorites, so we can immediately dive into our favorite games. So let's see what systems and games are included. I'm going to swap over to the carbon theme, which I really like for this. We can see there are almost 62,000 retro games packed here, which is 20,000 more than the Windows SD card version, and I'll show you why soon. I'm going to blitz through this, so let's pay attention right here, which shows how many games are in each individual system. Then I'll double back and go into some specific systems. Here we go. We can see here that pretty much every game from every retro console is included. I asked on a recent community poll which games that you'd like me to test out, and our great viewer Thule Gaming requested Maximum Carnage. Let's search for it and select this NES version, load it up, and I never got to play this as a kid, but this is so great. It reminds me of Batman Returns on the SNES 2, which is such a great game. Jarrett's Macabre requested Twisted Metal. Let's search for this, select the PS1 version, or I'm going to select this cool truck, and wow, I've never played this, and this is why I love these SD retro game cards, as we get to explore games that we never got a chance to play growing up. Atari ST was my first ever PC as a kid, so let's scroll to Bomb Jack, which was the very first game that made me fall in love with video games. Some of these super retro systems are a bit fiddly with the controls. For Atari, I pressed select, which changed it to joypad mode, and wow, this just totally brings back so many nostalgia vibes. This is so awesome. Let's check out a few more modern consoles. GameCube has 152 games. Let's have a look at Burnout, and this plays really great with the controls all good. Wii only has 2 games unfortunately. Dreamcast has 42. Let's scroll down to Street Fighter Alpha 3. Wow, this looks so nice on the Steam Deck OLED screen and plays so well. There's only 3 PS3 games, but almost 700 PS1 games. Let's have a look in and load up some ATF Quad Power Racing, and yep, controls are working great and this looks so much fun. And finally, let's check out PS2, which is 339 games. Let's have a good scroll to some Crash Bandicoot. And yep, I can confirm that all of the controls work great. It feels and looks so good, and this is definitely a game I'll be playing on this SD card. And now let's check out the new 1TB SD card for Windows handhelds like the ROG Ally. Pancake now has their own incredible merchandise that's just dropped, and if you love Pancake, then check these out at the link in the description. So let's look at the top 10 tips on the SD card for Windows handhelds like the Ally by launching RetroBat. So tip 1 is to head into system settings. There isn't an option here like on the Steam Deck version to change the rotation area, so we don't need to do this. I do like the 12-hour clock format, so I'll select this here. Tip 2 is to head into the game settings area. scroll down a little and enable this autosave and load toggle to on, so games autosave and load, which saves us time. Tip 3 is while we're still in game settings, is head to the retro achievements and toggle this to on, then simply enter our username and password. And again, if you don't have an account, then I really do recommend doing so, as it gives us awesome PS5 Platinum like trophies for retro games, and it does take a few minutes to scrape achievements from within our retro games. Tip 4 is to head into user interface settings, click on theme set, and we can change system theme here. Personally, I much prefer Artflix over the default comic scrap, so I'll select this and then press B to exit, and then B again to set it, and here it is. Tip 5 is to head into sound settings and disable the front end music, as I personally find this really does become very annoying as we navigate the menus. For tip 6, head into game collection settings, then systems displayed, and we can see here loads of systems by default are not displayed, like my first ever PC, the amazing Atari ST. So select here all systems that you want right here. I'm going to select all to see everything. Tip 7 is that of course it can get very overwhelming trekking through systems and the vast array of games, but if we hold the Y button on our favourite games, then head into the favourites area, then we can dip in and out of our favourite games right here. Tip 8 is that by pressing the X button, we can search for any game instead of trawling through systems and games individually, which saves so much time. Tip 9 is essential. Head into controller settings, then controller mapping, hold the A button, then simply map every single button on our Ally to fully ensure all buttons work perfectly for every system and game. And for tip 10 is to head to game collection settings, then start on system. We can select here our favourite system to dive straight into upon launch, but I'm going to select my favourites folder so I can jump straight into my favourite games. And now let's see how many game systems and games are on this Windows SD, and the total here is over 42,000. I'll show in a moment why it's 20,000 less than the Steam Deck version. I'm going to blitz through these systems, so keep an eye on the number of games for each system here. Then I'll go back and highlight a few systems. Here we go. So we can see that for retro systems like the Genesis, it has pretty much every game. Too Late Gaming requested Batman and Robin, so let's search for it, then load it up. Wow, I've never played this, but it looks like so much fun. I'm definitely going to play more of this. And let's finish with a couple of higher end systems to see how these run. There are 34 games on Dreamcast, so let's load up the classic that is Crazy Taxi. Man, this game is so much fun. I would definitely recommend that you play this if you get this SD card. Let's press select and start together to end the game. PS1 has over 600 games. Wow, there is a lot to choose from here, but let's select some Colin McRae Rally. Wow, this is such a classic. If you love racing games, then this is definitely a must play. Next, let's try PS2, and there's 180 games here. And unfortunately, the controls didn't seem to work here. I did try going into the RetroBat folder, then emulators, then the PCSX2 folder, which is the PS2 emulator, then the PCSX2 launch file, then settings, then controllers, and I did try to remap them to the Ally's controls, but it still didn't seem to work. If you have any solutions to this, then let us know in the comments and I'll pin your post. There's 1 Wii game, 2 Wii U games, and 7 Switch games, but I'm not going to show those. So let's address why the Windows version has 20,000 less retro games than the Steam Deck version. So let's quit, head into the main folder, then into PlayNight, launch the PlayNight full screen app, and yes, we can see here that it has a bunch of PC games included. I'm going to be honest, I'm not really a fan of them including these. I would much prefer many more retro games which had to be sacrificed for having these here, even if you do like shawarma. So should you buy one of these SD cards? Well, if you're just not into playing retro games, or someone who just does not think that companies should be selling retro solutions like these SD cards, or perhaps you have your own emulation setup fully configured, then these SD cards just aren't for you. However, if you're brand new to emulation and would love it all set up for you, Or perhaps you just don't have the time to do it all yourself, or if you just love playing retro games and are totally excited to discover so much of gaming history and to relive our childhoods like I've done with BombJack, then I really do think that you would love these. The 1TB SD card for the Ally and other Windows handhelds comes in at around £100 and dollars, and the Steam Deck version comes in at slightly less. I'll leave links to both in the description, and there's even more off if you manage to get these in the current April sale that runs for the next 6 days of recording this through to April 20th. And when we consider that buying the exact A2 1TB SD card off Amazon is only like £10 and dollars less, I think that these are pretty great value. I'd love to hear what you think about these in the comments. Please do share any tips that you have with SD cards like these. A huge thanks to Latashia and the great team at JMachin for reaching out and allowing me to test these. And as a thank you for watching this far, I'd love to share this awesome quote. Remember, most of our stress comes from the way that we respond, not the way life is. Adjust our attitude and all the extra stress is gone. Yes, it is so easy to lose our peace in very stressful situations, but let's do our best to remain calm, to rise above those things and people who try to upset us, so stay encouraged today, guys. And if you enjoyed today's video, then check out my thoughts on these amazing value AR glasses with a virtual 201-inch screen next. I appreciate every single one of you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.